Hello YouTube, this is Bruno. In the last two videos, we looked at the copper farm and manual copper aging, so it may not surprise you that this video is about automatic copper aging. And I must tell you that I'm really happy with the farm I designed. It's fully AFKable, can be scaled in size, it's fairly easy to build, and basically can't break. Nothing against the previous copper aging machines. The only ones I know are Pixlriffs David machine and Cubicmetres copper aging setup, but they're both a lot of effort to build. And I have a confession to make. I'm sloppy. Really sloppy. I make a ton of mistakes. And while I admire people who can build complex machines that will break if you place a wrong block, I couldn't do it. So what I tried to do here is to make this farm very simple to build and very robust. So it's very hard to break it. And if you make a mistake building it, you will be able to fix it easily. Naturally, the simplicity implies that we could improve speed by making things more complex, but I'm quite happy with the speed already. The machine fully oxidizes about half a shulker box of blocks per hour if you AFK at it, which is pretty good in my opinion. This is a machine where you don't need a redstone diploma to build it, and if you want to make it faster you can always size it up, which hardly adds anything to the building effort. The machine has two modes, and we'll get to that in a moment, but you can just fill in about 2 shulker boxes of copper blocks, and depending on how much oxidized copper you have put in, it will oxidize them in about 8 hours. Or you can also have a continuous operation, AFK at the machine, and then it will fully oxidize about half a shulker box per hour. So let's have a look at what's happening here. The player sits in a minecart and places blocks. We put fresh blocks in a water stream next to the player, so we'll never run out of blocks. Now pistons push the blocks over. And then right at the push limit, we have another flying machine that pushes the blocks down, and another one that pushes the blocks over. And so on, and so on, and so on, until the blocks finally arrive here at the last bit where we have a mobile TNT duper blow them up. All broken blocks go into a water stream and into an item sorter that sorts the block according to oxidization state. So we have a shulker box loader for fully oxidized blocks. These are removed from the system, and all blocks that are not fully oxidized go into these chest silos here. But all of the blocks are pushed over oxidized copper or below oxidized copper to speed up aging to a manageable amount. If you want to know why this works, please check my last video where I explain all this in detail. Now, an important safety feature is that nothing bad will happen if you reach the push limit, and in fact this will happen from time to time, especially because the TNT duper is a bit slower than the other flying machines, and TNT explosions always have some degree of randomness. So this will happen from time to time, that the flying machines can't push all of the blocks. But at the next pass of the flying machines, they will try again, and all those blocks will be pushed over if there's room. The machine can be easily scaled in size. You can make the width larger or smaller. You can also add a few more bands to the platforms here. And basically each band will just cost you one flying machine, a little return station, and a bit of redstone line over here. But keep in mind that you will need oxidized copper to achieve a decent aging speed, so the larger the machine is, the more oxidized copper you need. I recommend a 1:1 ratio, so this machine here has a capacity of about 2 shulker boxes, but also uses 2 shulker boxes of oxidized copper to set it up. If you are in a pinch, you could start out with half the oxidized copper. So here I have placed about 1 shulker box of oxidized copper along with 2 shulker boxes of fresh copper blocks, but it will take a lot longer for these blocks to oxidize. But after about 15 hours you should be ready to harvest this copper, even by using less oxidized copper. So let's have a look at what is happening here in the world download. Let me show you around the redstone, and I will make a second video which will be a building tutorial, not a full block by block tutorial, but I'll explain all the redstone in detail. Let's start with the block supply. We have a simple clock that puts item in a water stream. This dropper is fed by one of these 3 chests. We will start with a chest containing fresh copper blocks, and here is also a shulker box unloader where you can throw in shulker boxes full of fresh copper blocks, and they will go into this chest here, but it will also leave some room, why I'll explain in a moment. So as long as there are blocks in there, they go into the water stream, and the water stream will resupply the player with blocks, so the player can just keep placing blocks. And all of the blocks not picked up by the player will go back into the water stream, into this item sorter here, and end up in this item filter for fresh copper. But then we have a second silo for exposed copper and a third for weathered copper. And if the first silo is empty, we have a little circuit here that will switch over automatically to the second silo. So once all of the fresh copper is gone, we will continue with the exposed copper that is still in the system. And if that is done, we will continue with the weathered copper, which is empty at the moment. And finally, if all of these blocks are placed, we will go back to fresh copper, just in case there came in a few fresh copper blocks from the TNT duper. And then again, we go to exposed, then to weathered, and so on, until finally we reach a stage where no more blocks are in the machine. So essentially, the system will not stop until all 3 silos are empty and all blocks are either fully oxidized or currently in the machine being pushed over. At this point, you can either wait for more fresh copper to come in, or if you want the oxidized copper in the machine, you can just use cobble or dirt or some other disposable blocks to push out the copper blocks and harvest them. With 1 layer of oxidized copper, and here in the world download I will use again oxidized cut copper so that you can see which copper was placed here from the start. You will need about 8 hours for each go, so replace all of these blocks with fresh copper, wait 8 hours, and then put in fresh copper again. With 2 layers above and below, you could cut this time to 6 hours, but for the rest of the video we'll go with 1 layer because it's cheaper and also the requirement for you to know to see what's going on here. The player sits in a simple flying machine that has pistons on both sides, pushing the copper away. The flying machine is activated by a clock, and we have redstone lines activating all of the other flying machines, so they can all push the copper that was placed by the player just a moment ago, or they can push over the copper that was pushed in by the previous machine. With the exceptions of a few blocks, especially here at the end where the machines cross over, we'll be able to place more or less 2 rows of blocks by going back and forth once. The first flying machine here needs a bit more delay, about 4 seconds, but all of the flying machines are chained with 0.6 seconds delay. The flying machines are really the simplest machines that you can imagine, with each consisting just of 4 slimes, 2 sticky pistons, 1 normal piston to push over the copper, and 2 observers. Each flying machine also have a small return station set to 1 second delay that will send it back after it arrives. We need 1 second to make sure that this piston is no longer extended. And that's about it for this part of the machine. And if you forget about all of the copper that we have placed, and also the oxidized copper to pre-aged, this is all there is. A couple of water streams, a water collection area, and a few flying machines, 1 sorting system, a couple of shulker box loaders, and a shulker box unloader. And of course, a few clocks. I built all of this in vanilla survival in about 3 hours, and I was still figuring out how to set up the system, so I could probably do it faster the next time. So the only remaining component is the TNT duper here. And initially I thought I would just use a flying machine here, but I ran into a problem. We need some delay between TNT blasts so that items have time to fall into the water stream before the next blast could destroy them. And I'm just not good enough with flying machines to build a motor that is slow enough. We need roughly 1.5 seconds between blasts. So if anyone out there knows a slow flying machine motor that can go both ways and takes about 2 seconds for each step, let me know. Anyway, I created a kind of a stepping motor that is controlled by an external clock over here, which we can make as slow or as fast as we want to. The redstone signal is propagated on blocks that don't stick. Here we use pumpkins, but you could also use glazed terracotta or anything really that doesn't stick and you can place redstone on. And this controls a flying machine here that pushes back and forth the TNT duper. And this is one of the very basic TNT duper designs here. We have another clock that will change the direction of the stepping motor, or we could change it manually by hitting this node block. However, I would recommend to let the flying machine go to the end because otherwise it might get stuck and not return. Unfortunately, there is still a small chance that the TNT duper could destroy a few copper blocks. It can happen that a copper block gets destroyed, like that one, but basically lands on a next block that will be destroyed in a few seconds. That's why I put these obsidian blocks here. Broken copper blocks will never land on this obsidian, it's too high. And they can't land on the other side, on the open side, because the blocks will be destroyed. but in the direction of the flying machine, back and forth, it could happen that a block lands there. And the chance is about 1 in 300. So if you put in a shulker box of copper blocks, you will lose about 3 items, which is fine for me. Copper is renewable. You could get to 100% harvest rate if you push all of this into a blast chamber. So this is really all that you have to recreate if you want to build a farm. I guess it would only take a few minutes more if you wanted to, say, make it twice as wide and double the capacity for copper aging. After building this, you put in the first batch of copper, which will generate your platforms. Then you add the oxidized copper and also a bit of lighting. You will have to light up the platforms, because even though the player is perfectly safe, I had cases where creepers and skeletons got into a bit of a skirmish, and the creepers happened to blow up here, killing my flying machine in the process. Just add a few shroom lights or sea lanterns or whatever blocks you prefer to make the platform safe. Despite the lighting, you will see a few mobs spawn, because due to a bug in Minecraft, mobs can spawn on blocks that are pushed, even if they are usually not spawnable, so they are lit up or they are made of glass or something. So a few mobs will spawn on the flying machines, but usually they will fall right off, and I never had enough to cause any problems. If you want to be perfectly safe, you will have to put top slabs or other non-spawnable blocks over the path of the flying machines. So no mobs can spawn there due to hitbox collisions. Okay, I said this farm has 2 modes. The other mode requires that you're AFK at the farm for a longer time, but it will almost cut the time of oxidization in half. And it sounds a bit wonky at first, but bear with me. And for this we'll look at the aging chart that I presented in my last video. Here for 1 layer of fresh copper and 1 layer of oxidized copper, which is pretty close to our farm layout. I added 1 extra curve, which is the speed, or the number of blocks that are oxidized 1 step further per minute. And here you see something interesting. We start at a pretty decent speed, get faster for an hour or so, but then the speed kind of crashes and the conversion gets very slow. The reason for that is that we have a few stragglers of fresh copper that block 40 blocks around them to go from exposed to weathered. And we're going at a very slow speed until most of the stragglers are finally converted. And then we pick up speed again, going to mostly weathered now. But then we have another slow phase before we do the final conversion. But we'll never reach full speed again because we still have a few stragglers left, slowing us down. So here's the idea. We don't try to go all the way from fresh to oxidized in our machine, but instead just convert the fresh copper mostly to exposed. That's why we have so much room in the silo. If we throw in 10 shulkers of fresh copper, then we may need to store 5 double chests of exposed copper. Anyway, once we have converted all the fresh copper, we'll start placing the exposed copper, and now we are again at full speed, because we use exclusively exposed copper and have no stragglers at all. And this means now the exposed copper converts just as fast as the fresh copper in our diagram. And once the exposed copper is converted to weathered, we continue there. And once the weathered copper is converted, we may have a bit of backlog with some more fresh, exposed and weathered copper, because this was the copper that was still in the machine when we switched over. At some point we run out of blocks, and either we just leave the copper blocks in, or we once top it up with disposable blocks like cobble to flush out the copper. So think of it as if we would go over the aging copper and manually remove all the stragglers. It might sound a bit weird at first, but this way we can cut down the time almost by half. In this mode, I managed to convert 10 shulker boxes of fresh copper in about 20 hours. And the reason for the speed up is that we always work in the conversion area where the speed is the highest. To switch the mode, all we have to do is to change the time that our copper is on the machine. So right now it was tuned that we place the blocks as fast as possible, and we will fill the whole machine in about 60 minutes. If we just increase the time between the starts of the flying machine, so that the copper doesn't go in too fast, the copper will be in there a bit longer. So if we want to go to 90 minutes, the time is a bit of easy math. We have 9 stages, each 12 blocks. That makes 108 blocks per column. We place 2 blocks per column in a run. So we'll just start the flying machine every 100 seconds or so, and everything is fine. But you don't really need to do the math if you have a different size. Just observe the machine. If too many fresh copper blocks arrive at the TNT duper, just add a bit more time between runs. The price for this faster mode is that the player has to remain in the machine placing blocks all the time. If you take the slower all-at-once mode, you will need about 1 hour AFK time to fill the machine, and then you can do something else for 7 hours, like AFK in the nearby copper farm. As you can switch modes by just removing or adding a few items to that clock here, it's up to you which one you choose. The world download contains both the machine in action as well as the barebone machine. It is the very first version of this machine, so even though I'm happy with it and it works flawlessly on my survival server, please check the description for corrections or additional notes, as I can change only the description and not the video. To get the machine running, make sure this clock is running here, putting items into the water stream. You will have to enable this clock here to send the flying machine with a player. To stop or start the TNT duper, just use one of the levers here to stop this clock, triggering the change of direction. So this is my little copper aging machine, and I believe it's a new design, as I don't know any other copper aging facility that works in a similar way. I have not yet added a chunk loader, but the system is aligned to fit into a 3x3 chunk area and can be covered by one chunk loader. Without a chunk loader, you need to make sure that all flying machines are stopped when you leave the area, otherwise there's a chance, as always with flying machines, that they break if unloaded in mid-flight. Also, there are a few more things that I might streamline later. For example, add one global on-off switch, and the flying machine pushing the TNT duper may fail to start again if you switch directions at the wrong time, if the flying machine is not at the end. But all you need to do to restart is usually to power one piston or one observer. But all these are minor things, and I ran this farm on my server for over 30 hours and much longer in my single player test world, so don't let these minor issues stop you from building the farm. If you made it this far, why not subscribe and perhaps even recommend this channel to your Minecraft friends? It would mean the world to me to get to 1,000 subscribers, and at the time of recording we have only 200 subscribers to go. Also feel free to put in suggestions for a possible 1,000 subscriber special. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you want to see more videos like this, and see you next time. Bye bye.